Chapter 9. He knew this could happen. Well, not exactly, but this is what he'd been warned about. It would do you well to stay away from His Highness. Ashe leaned his head back against the wall with a soft thud. Everything happened so fast, and there were still so many unanswered questions. Who made the anonymous tip? Who planted those things in Ashe's room? How did that vial get in his jacket? The last one was simple enough. It had to have been that nobleman he'd accidentally collided with in the ballroom, on his way to follow Dimitri. Goddess, I'm an idiot, Ashe thought. If only he hadn't come to the ball. If only he'd ignored Sylvain and stayed home. No, even before that. If he hadn't come to the capital in the first place. If Kristoff had come instead like usual. He never would have met Dimitri, become his friend, fallen in love. No, this was not his fault. He couldn't change the past, and he wouldn't trade his time spent with Dimitri for anything in the world. Ashe loved him, and he needed to get out of this cell, find Dimitri, and tell him everything. His past, his feelings. A loud screech echoed down the corridor, followed by clicking heels on the stone floor. Ashe stood as the stranger approached and scowled as he realized who it was. "What do you want?" he growled. "Ooh, looks like the rat still has some fight in him after all." "Cornelia." "I tried to warn you, you know," she mocked. "All you had to do was keep your distance from His Majesty. You brought this on yourself." "Why are you here?" Ashe demanded. "You got what you wanted." "Oh, no, my dear. You see, I've only just begun." She stepped towards the bars separating them. "You were just the jump start I needed. A thief among us, treason within the government. I couldn't have planned it any better. The lords don't trust themselves anymore, let alone each other. His Majesty is devastated, betrayed by someone he believed was his friend." Ashe could only stare as Cornelia tisked, smirk widening, his rage growing to a boiling point. The advisor continued gloating. "And now your poor father has to clean up the mess you made." Ashe clenched his fists. "Do what you want with me, but leave my family out of this." Cornelia laughed. "You should have thought about what you did before you defied me. All eyes are on Gaspard now. Who would have suspected that Leonardo was planning to overthrow the royal family and use his adopted son to do it? Tragic." "No." "Yes. The council is calling an emergency session. It's likely they'll strip your father of his governance. You'll be back on the street, living in the gutter like the urchin you are. And I will be one step closer to the throne." Ashe lunged at her with a feral scream. He slammed his body into the bars, reaching through them and clawing at Cornelia to no avail. The advisor just laughed and exited the chamber, her heels clicking on the stone in her wake. "Cornelia!" Ashe screamed after her, the door closing with a clap like thunder. "Cornelia! I... The adrenaline faded as quickly as it came. Please, not..." Ashe crumpled to the concrete floor, boneless, broken and tired. "What have I done?" Ashe wept. Rest did not come easy that night. Ashe tossed and turned on the cot in his cell, falling into periods of unconsciousness rather than sleep. Morning eventually arrived, along with a bland breakfast he barely touched, stomach flipping thanks to his nerves. He would pace in the cell, lie down and stare at the ceiling, then pace again in a cruel and unending cycle. He received no other visitors, which was both a blessing and a curse. Time passed at a snail's pace. Lunch was left for him, and he paid it no mind. How could he eat, not knowing how his family was doing? Ashe drove himself crazy as he imagined what was happening in the council chamber. Did the lords really believe Leonardo was out to overthrow the royal family, and that he used Ashe to do it? Would they vote to strip Leonardo of his power? If they did, what happened next? Would Cornelia eventually secede and Dimitri be removed from the throne? A commotion at the entrance of the chamber slowly drew Ashe out of his thought spiral. There were muffled voices gaining volume, and the door opened with an echoing screech. "Sir, I must protest. Under orders from Lady Cornelia, your loyalties are to King Dimitri, not the royal advisor. Or have you forgotten?" "Was that to do?" "No, sir, but the advisor..." "Therefore, by order of His Majesty, stand aside, or I shall have you arrested for treason as well." Silence. Ashe assumed the guard was weighing his options. The guard finally conceded with a resigned, "As you wish, my lord," and heavy steps reverberated down the corridor and stopped at Ashe's cell. "Hello, Ashe." Ashe sat up slowly. "Dudu, what are you doing here?" Dudu smiled, reaching into his pocket and produced a set of keys. "Getting you out of here." He put the correct key in the lock and the door swung wide. Ashe tried to process this turn of events. "I don't understand. You're letting me go? Just like that?" The king's vassal nodded. "Some new information has come to light proclaiming your innocence. You have the sincerest apology of the royal family." "Dimitri sent you?" Ashe couldn't help the hope and relief that flooded his voice. Dudu frowned. "Unfortunately, no." Ashe's heart sank. "I made let's call it an executive decision, to retrieve you before telling His Majesty. Come, the council is meeting right now. We don't have much time." Ashe stood and followed Dudu out of the chamber, past the guard who looked like he'd eaten something incredibly sour. I still don't understand, Dudu," Ashe said softly. "Don't worry. I'll tell you as we go." On the way to the council chamber, Dudu weaved a tale that, if Ashe hadn't been expecting it firsthand, sounded like the penultimate chapters of a heist novel. "And they took you away last night, so I went to see our head of security," Dudu explained. "No one knows the place the way they do. We have you on video leaving your room before the coronation ceremony and reception, and not returning. However, a house servant did approach and enter your room. We don't know what he did inside, but Byleth believes he planted the thieves' kit in poison vials. The first anonymous tip came in shortly after he left." "One of the palace staff?" Ashe asked, wondering why someone would go through so much trouble to frame him for treason. Dudu shook his head as they turned the corner. "No, he was someone in service to another kingdom lord. But there's more. Do you remember anything about the man who bumped into you in the ballroom during the reception?" "No, I didn't think much of it. But looking back, I bet it's safe to assume he's the one who planted the vial in my jacket." "That's what we think as well," Dudu confirmed solemnly. "That man was Lord Harold Clemen, Lord Maxwell's younger brother, second in line for their governess." "Lord Clemen?" Ashe questioned. "I know of them. Nato's had land disputes with him before." Dudu nodded. "Speaking with the house servant proved most valuable. It seems their house harbors great ill towards Gaspard, though why the bad blood he could not say. His lord, the younger Clemen, told him he would be assisting the royal advisor this week. He acted on her orders." Ashe froze. "Cornelia. I knew it." "Did you know something about this?" "Sort of, I guess. Cornelia, she threatened me after the ball last month. She warned me to stay away from Dimitri. Then she came to see me yesterday and said I helped her get closer to the throne." Ashe looked up at Dudu. "She wants to remove Dimitri from power and rule herself." Dudu placed a comforting hand on Ashe's shoulder. "Ashe, listen to me. This is not your fault. We're going to fix this." Ashe wiped at his eyes, unaware he had started crying. I know. I didn't think it would ever end up like this." Dudu gave him a reassuring smile. "Come, we're almost there." Ashe and Dudu crept into the council chamber, though their silence was unnecessary. The chamber echoed with shouts of the nobility, heatedly arguing over something the men couldn't make out right away. "Stay behind me," Dudu cautioned, hoping to keep Ashe hidden for now. No one had noticed their arrival. Ashe looked around the chamber. Lenato stood alone in front of the dais. His father was calm and silent as a stone, while a storm raged on behind him. He saw Kristoff sitting at their assigned desk, holding Evelyn as she sobbed quietly, anger rising behind his brother's eyes. "Gaspard has been harboring criminals to overthrow the royal family," someone exclaimed. "They should be stripped of their governance," sounded another. On the dais, Duke Fraldarius called for order with the rapping of his gavel, and the last of the arguments faded into silence at last. It was then that Ashe looked at King Dimitri. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in weeks, eyes dark and empty. With order finally restored to the chamber, the king spoke, his voice void of the cadence and melody Ashe had grown to love. "Lord Gaspard," he began, "you stand before this council and your liege accused of treason and high crimes against the crown. Crimes of such a nature are intolerable, and punishable up to and including exile. What say you?" Lenato stood straighter, matching the poise of his king. "Your Majesty, I stand before this council and my liege, proclaiming my innocence. The virtue of Gaspard remains loyal to the holy kingdom of Fargus and its ruler." Dimitri nodded as the murmurs of the lords grew again. "Traitors! Exile!" With another bang of the gavel, Duke Fraldarius called for order once more, and silence returned to the chamber. "This is a dark day for Fargus," Dimitri said gravely. "To see one of our own accused of such terrible and unforgivable, truly heinous acts." He sighed, as though he was trying to find a way out of this situation. "I am unfortunately left with no choice. On my authority, I am suspending the governance of Gaspar pending—" "No!" Ashe exclaimed, running towards the dais. Dudu called to him, but Ashe didn't stop, and the room exploded into chaos. "Seize him! Treason!" A guard tackled Ashe to the floor, arms wrenched behind his back. He heard Evelyn cry out as he struggled against the weight at his back. The sound of a gavel echoed through the room again, and an uneasy hush fell over the crowd. "What is the meaning of this?" Dimitri demanded. "He escaped, your majesty!" Cornelia's frazzled voice rang out from the dais. Ashe struggled harder. "This proves just how dangerous he really is. Clearly he's come—" "Your majesty, if I may." Dudu's usually quiet voice thundered over the royal advisors, silencing her. Dimitri looked at his vassal, puzzled. "Dudu?" "Your majesty, we have evidence supporting Lord Gaspard's innocence. Lord Hubert was framed for treason, and we have reason to believe the mastermind behind the events of yesterday may in fact be the royal advisor." The chamber filled with gasps and murmurs. "That's preposterous!" Cornelia shouted. "You've let that rat influence your decisions and judgment!" "I have not," Dudu challenged. "We have video evidence of the nefarious items being planted in Lord Hubert's room. A house servant, originally in service to Lord Harold Clemen and his family, but hired out to Lady Armyn." There was more murmuring, increasing in volume as everyone's attention was drawn to Lord Maxwell Clemen, the older brother and current leader of their territory. "The accomplice is in royal custody and is preparing a statement against Lady Armyn as we speak." "These are serious accusations against your brother, Lord Clemen," Dimitri said, turning to the lord. "What say you?" Lord Clemen, an older gentleman around Lenata's age, stood to address his liege. "Your majesty, I have no knowledge of the dealings Lady Armyn may have had with my family or their staff." "You lie!" Cornelia shouted, face red with rage. "This was your idea just as much. You wished to see Gaspard fall." "The lady approached my brother and I asking to hire one of our staff for our time here. My brother agreed, though I do not know the terms of their agreement." "Liar! You fools approached me! Your majesty, please—" "Enough!" Dimitri shouted, bringing the chamber to a halt. "Arrest them, all of them, until we can complete a thorough investigation." Guards apprehended Cornelia and Lord Clemen, both still slinging insults at the other as they were removed from the council chamber. "In light of these new declarations, it is on my authority that the charges against Lord Gaspard and Lord Hubert are hereby dismissed without prejudice. Lord Gaspard shall retain his governance. This session is adjourned." Relief flooded through Ashe's body. The guard released him and he ran to meet his family. "Ashe!" Evelyn called as she jumped into his arms and hugged him tight, tears dampening his jacket. "Hey, Evie, it's okay," he soothed, hugging her just as tight. "I've got you." I thought I'd never see you again," she wailed. I'm sorry for fighting with you, for joking about the prince and... Her words faded as she buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing. Kristoff reached for their sister, prying her off of Ashe. Catching his brother's eye, he inclined his head to something behind them. Turning around, Ashe was met with the eyes of King Dimitri. He smiled softly, shoulders sagging in relief as he stepped towards his liege. "Lord Hubert," Dimitri began, I am sincerely sorry for the distress that has been placed on you and your family. I assure you that I will not waste a moment to bring justice to those responsible." Ashe bowed. "Thank you, your majesty. I know without a doubt that you will do right by us." An awkward silence stretched between them. Ashe wanted to tell Dimitri his feeling, but the formalities left him second-guessing his confession. When it became clear neither man was ready to speak, Ashe turned to excuse himself. "My apologies, your majesty, but I should return to my family." "Ashe, wait!" Ashe's heart skipped a beat at the casual use of his name rather than title, and the pressure of Dimitri's hand on his. Dimitri fell into a deep bow. "Please," he whispered, barely audible. "I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Ashe allowed himself another soft smile, even though Dimitri couldn't see it. He stepped back towards the king and gently caressed the side of his face. Slipping his hand under Dimitri's chin, Ashe gave a gentle lift, encouraging the king to stand. Before he could stand to his full height, Ashe stepped in close and kissed him, and the world around them faded into nothing.